So returning to Kaylee, if one of your children from a very young age was expressing gender dysphoria, they just felt that this body that they were inhabiting was just, they couldn't live in it, and you took a very prudent wait and watch approach, you talked about it, you took them to proper therapists who did the right questioning, looked at family dynamics, history, did all the right stuff, yet years later, they still said, I can't inhabit this body. How far would you be willing to go, if anywhere, besides the therapy?
It's a good question. I think it's a good reminder that there needs to be tremendous empathy kind of granted. Sometimes my knee-jerk response to these parents that I see putting their 9-year-olds on puberty blockers and rendering their children essentially sterile for the rest of their lives, I get frustrated and I get angry. But I need to remember that is born often of kind of desperation and really they're trying to do the best thing. But if it were my kid, I wouldn't do it. I just wouldn't play the game because I think it's very similar to me. Now, I know that I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but somebody who thinks that they are morbidly obese, sincerely believes that cannot live with their obese body, I'm not going to help them achieve their goal weight of 65 pounds. That's not a loving thing to do. Now, if my child wanted to wear boy clothes or express herself in a way that defies gender norms, that's one thing. That doesn't have permanent physical repercussions, but biological sex is immutable. It is what it is. You get the body that you get. You're stuck with that. Like, that's what you get, and you get to learn to love it. And I mean, this whole culture for the last 20 years of radical self-acceptance, this to me is the opposite of that. This is actually encouraging people to reject their perfectly healthy bodies. If your body is perfectly healthy and beautiful and your mind rejects it, the problem is in your mind, not in your body. And so I think that we can address the mind, but I'm not going to ever allow or encourage my children to self-harm. Double mastectomies for 14-year-olds. Your body's beautiful and it works and there's a function. That's just not something that I would ever do. God forbid that I should have to experience that. It would be very difficult, and I have sympathy and empathy for those who do, but I'm not going to put my kids on drugs. Lupron is another conversation entirely. The drugs that they're putting these kids on that have not even been approved by the FDA or tested for this purpose for any length of time. I just think it's dangerous, and it's not something I would do.
It's funny that we have this discussion about, is hormone replacement therapy appropriate for women after menopause, because of elevated cancer risks and stroke and cardiovascular impacts and stuff like that. And we're not having this discussion about the same drugs being given to young teenagers or people in their early 20s. We're not having that discussion. Why are we having this discussion about whether a 54-year-old woman can have an estrogen patch to deal with actual physical symptoms of menopause, but we're not having this discussion about whether these same synthetic hormones are appropriate for, a 21-year-old young woman or man? That's ridiculous.
Right, and you're saying 21, but of course it can be younger as well. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. It's infuriating.
Kaylee, you used a comparison I've made as well, because most people can relate to this idea of somebody having some body image issues, body dysmorphia, anorexia, an accepted mental health issue or mental illness. But if you try to use that language with trans people, now you're a bigot, now you're hateful. And if you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist or other medical doctor, you can suffer some repercussions. And we know that Ken Zucker has suffered that as well. And there was a documentary in the BBC. It came out this year, and Ken Zucker was heavily featured in it. And it was the UK and in Toronto. A few other well-known experts were featured. And they petitioned the CBC, which is Canada's National Broadcasting Corporation, to not show the documentary. And they backed down. And some people are saying it sounded like a parody because they say in this place it'll be a Jewish Christmas. It just seems so bizarre that they backed down. And I've watched the documentary. It seems very balanced. I don't know. I was going to ask you, Kaylee, have you seen this particular documentary?
I'm peripherally aware of it. I know that it exists, the controversy revolving around it, but I've not seen it myself.
Okay. And Antonia, have you seen it?
I have not seen it. It is on my list of things to do over the holidays, actually.
Okay, because I was speaking on Twitter to the mother whose child, it's a biological boy who is transitioning into a girl. He's very young, or she's young, but she's growing out her hair, wearing a dress, no hormone therapy yet. And she said she's gotten a lot of negative feedback. And I was trying to get her to say to me, and she didn't actually ever answer, did she think that the portrayal of her family was biased? Was it skewed? Because I thought it was very sympathetic to her family. She and her family were not portrayed as terrible people. Sadly, the commentary just tore her apart. You're destroying this boy. It was just horrific. So Kayla, I'm glad that you mentioned that you personally would not allow your child to do certain things. You would let them maybe dress differently, grow their hair out long or whatever, or short, but that you wouldn't go to that next level, the medical level, right?
Right.
So I'm glad that you mentioned this, understanding that how difficult this is. But for this family, they were just pilloried and just called the most horrific things. So I can understand if someone's afraid of a documentary being aired for the impact on that person, but they made a choice to appear in this, just like Antonia, you've made a choice to appear in this and to suffer the potential backlash, whatever that might be, and I really hope nothing comes of this. But because some bigots or hateful people or ignorant people or whatever on either sides of this the spectrum, because they exist, should we then suppress discussion about all this stuff? That's what it's coming down to. And so I want to ask you too, because I'm saying from a Canadian perspective, again, CBC, a very liberal TV station, media giant here, very, very liberal, was afraid of showing it. And people are saying that it was such a hateful, biased documentary. When you watch it, you're just going to shake your head and say, it seems pretty balanced. It gives both sides of the argument.
That's the hatefulness, is that our side doesn't get to have a position. I mean, I think that's what they're characterizing as hate, is that anytime you give us a voice at all, that's the hate. In fact, so I worked on a campaign here in Washington to repeal the bathroom law because it wasn't passed with the people's consent. It was pushed in via bureaucracy. And we were approached by CNN, and they asked us to join a debate against the opposition, which is led by a trans woman named Danny. But when my boss informed them that I would be the spokesperson for this debate that we were going to have, they wouldn't let me do it. They said it would be unfair. It would be unfair to position me, a biological female rape survivor, against a trans woman, because they were afraid that the public would have too much sympathy for me. So they wouldn't let us do it unless it was going to be my boss, who was a white Christian male. They wanted to pair this victimized trans person versus a bigot, basically, is how they're wanting to position it. Right. But the minute a female wanted a voice, they said, no, that's not fair and we won't do it. That's what you're talking about right there. It's media bias. It's that they've already decided whose voice needs to be positioned and broadcast and who needs to be shut down, who needs to win.
Right.
And it's not accidental, from my perspective, that the people in that equation who get to speak are both men. So a woman who wants to speak about her own experience of sexual violation or of a desire for physical privacy and emotional privacy, women don't get a voice in this. I remember right after the Heritage Foundation event, I was speaking afterwards with a young gay man who's very pro-trans, who was there, named Zach Ford. And I actually asked him, do I as a woman or do my young daughters deserve to have any space in public that is penis-free? And this odious man told me, no, you don't have any right to a public space that doesn't have penises in it, even if you're naked, because the penis is not a male organ. I was like, you're telling me, a survivor of abuse that has involved penises, you're telling Kaylee that we don't have any right not to be in the presence of naked penises if we wish to go to the pool, if we wish to go to the bathroom in public, if we wish to be out in public, at the sauna, anywhere. We don't have the right to not be exposed to the penises of complete strangers. That is appalling to me. And that he would say this to a complete stranger, that I had no right to determine which naked penises I actually encountered while I was undressed. That is rape culture right there. Trans activism is rape culture. We are exposing women and girls to sexual violence, whether or not it's actual contact, whether or not it actually has a sexual content overtly in the moment.
We to have a choice.
We don't have a choice as to which naked bodies we are exposed to if we wish to be in the public sphere at all. The only place I can avoid being exposed to males and penises is in the privacy of my own home. That is obscene.
For now, it is the only place, but hey, that's going to change too someday, probably, the way we're headed. I don't mean to be facetious.
That takes us back 200 years, and
I mean,
all these protections that women have fought for are now one by one being stripped. They have 6'7" males on college women's basketball teams. So everything that women have fought so hard to achieve as sex-based protections is being stripped from our hands, and the new patriarchy wears a dress. ZER pronouns. It's very frustrating. I mean, it's the same game, it's just a different strategy, and it's
Right.
very misogynistic, really, at its root. And maybe that's not everybody's intent. That's the byproduct, is misogyny.
Women who are lesbians or bisexuals who do not wish to have sex with men who say they are women are told that they are transphobic. The idea that lesbians are told that they must have sex with people with penises who say they are women, or they are bigots, or
Right.
vagina fetishists, that's obscene.
I don't think that gender identity and sexual orientation can coexist. I think one negates the other, because you have to be able to define what sex is with concrete terms in order to say that you are exclusively attracted to it. And I think that those two things are in such conflict, but nobody's really willing to have that discussion.
And this is what's so incredible. I mean, if somebody had written this out as a movie script 50 years ago, all right, they would have thought George Orwell has gone mad. All the work, as you say, that feminists have done or that gay activists have done, everything is being turned on its head. And when you think about some of these trans activists or SJWs, and by the way, I fight for social justice, reasonable social justice, real social justice all the time, but I use SJW to describe a certain type of person, this intransigent, cult-like person. So I'm not besmirching people who fight for social justice. It's a different thing. But when they ally themselves with the very people, so gay or trans or SJWs are allying themselves with the very people who would kill them in a heartbeat. Yeah. When they say they are superior to our culture, it's just, for lack of a better word, Orwellian and Kafkaesque. And I hate to use these terms because they're overused, but nothing would better describe that. I'm going to go Fellini-esque as well. So it's incredible that, as you say, all this progression that you've made over the years is being turned on its head, being stripped away. And each of you, including me, all three of us, might have a different theory as to why this has happened. But I don't care about the why. I care about the fact that it is happening. And this is why I'm having these series of interviews with various people to say we need to stop it because it is causing some great harm. It is a social experiment, once again. What the hell is homosexuality even about?
This argument is actually not working on gay men, and it's not even really being addressed to gay men. Trans men, women who have decided that they are men, gay men are not getting the "you're a bigot if you don't have sex with vaginas." That's not an argument that's going to fly. It's only women who don't have the right to choose who they are naked in front of, who they have sex with. It is being disproportionately targeted to women.
Right. But what they're seeing is that these boys and teens, if we let them be who they are, they would just turn out to be typical gay males. They're seeing gay males being almost told that you're so abhorrent, they would rather go through this surgery and everything so that they can be a woman who has a sexual interest in other men. That's much better than being a gay man who likes other men.
It's like the ultimate conversion therapy.
It's absolutely conversion therapy, and it's destroying an entire generation of young. I think the older transitioners are a very different population, but applying this transition trans ideology to children and teenagers and very young adults, it's Iranian. In Iran, if you're a gay man or a lesbian woman, you transition, and that takes care of the problem. We are turning into Iran, and I don't really think that's where we want to be.
Yes. These are different people, different experiences, different phenomena, and we have people from different categories speaking for other people because they're pushing their own agendas or their own needs or their own personal traumas they're trying to process through the lives of other people. And again, let's not forget who's being impacted the most, the kids and the families of these kids. I thank you so much for speaking out, especially Antonia, as far as this is your first public appearance. I really respect the courage it takes to put yourself on the line like this. Kaylee, of course, you as well, but you've been doing this. But this is Antonia's coming out party. So
I'm very pleased with that. She's such a great spokesperson.
I'm very, very glad that Emily gave me the opportunity. I think the thing I would say most is parents, speak up. Talk to your children about these issues early on. Talk to them about the importance of material reality and the fact that yourself is an emergent property of your body, and that there is no such thing as being born in the wrong body. Fight back, and fight back early and vocally, and fight back one-on-one with every parent and coworker, where this issue comes up. Talk. Because it's much harder for people to say, oh, you're a terrible bigot, when they know you as the mom on the playground or the coworker who does, these other kinds of really great work. It's very easy to demonize people on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. It's much, much, much harder to do that when you are rooted in a community. So get active on the ground in your real life communities and social circles. Speak up. Protect your kids.
I would just echo that. I think for me, the culture is so dominated by fear. I think if you look around and if you were to ask, 99% of the population behind closed doors, whether or not they agree with this or if they have any concerns, they would be honest. And most people think that this is kind of a runaway train, but everybody's so afraid to say that because they're going to get fired. But I think that we need to get to the point where we are much more afraid of what will happen if we don't speak up than we are of what will happen if we do. And that's where I found myself. And I've got to tell you that every single time I've ever spoken somewhere, I might get a couple nasty grams on, Twitter, but for every one, I've got 50 thank yous from people suffering in the wings who don't know what to do. And so I think every time you speak, that emboldens other people to speak up too. And it's really important because there are, like you said, kids' lives on the line. I mean, I think 50 years from now, we're going to see this huge backlash from these children who weren't protected, who were sterilized without kind of any regard for them. And they're going to come back and say, who fought for us? And I want to be able to say that I was one of them.
Well, again, I really appreciate both of you, A, for speaking with me, and B, for doing what you're doing. It's not easy. There are very few of us who are doing this. And as you said, Antonio, when you see a real person, now that's not going to change the cultists. Everything you said, you're just a wolf in sheep's clothing in their eyes. But I always say this, that if you can reach the less extreme, the non-intransigent people, then you have a chance of making some change. And it's not about hate, ignorance, or bigotry. It's about trying to understand this phenomenon better, do what's best for children. And we all may have different viewpoints about what that best thing is. I've said it very publicly. If a child, if they desperately need that medical transition and they go in that direction when they're an adult, not as a child, so I should say that, as an adult, if they've reached that point and that's truly what they need, and if there's a chance that it's going to make them happier, great. But I don't want to rush toward that. And even just saying that, even taking this prudent approach and a compassionate approach, and some would say a radical approach, saying if that's what they really, really need. And my colleagues like Dr. Blanchard, Dr. Bailey, Dr. Zucker, Dr. Cantor, Dr. Drager, all of them who've been pilloried by the trans community, all of them have done more to fight for the trans community. And as I said, we still get turned around and we're the monsters, we're the terrible people. So the fact that even such individuals can be targeted that way, and they're professionals and we have professional backing and so on, you as individuals who are now doing this grassroots organization, you're taking such a chance and you're taking such a risk. And I really, really do appreciate that. And I hope, never mind me, I hope other people do. And you're not doing it for their accolades. You're doing it for the safety of our children and the well-being of our children. So thank you.